Welcome, one and all, to Natalie and Company. I am Natalie, and you are the company that I do like to keep on occasion. Especially this time, I hope that you will keep me company for my Palestine reading vlog, part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, go check it out. It's not required reading. I think that you will enjoy this video just as much without it. But I think that video, I read a lot of nonfiction, very fact-based books. I forgot the word books. And I think that it led to a really just long and winding, for sure, history lesson in which I learned a lot of details about the history of Palestine and their resistance movements and everything, including something that has permanently found a space in my brain, found a space in my heart even. I will let our old pal from the last vlog, Rashid Khalidi, explain it to you because he could do a way better job than I ever could. The resurrection of the idea of Palestine faced an uphill battle in the wake of the 1967 war in most parts of the world. In Beirut, on the other hand, where I now spent the summers with my mother and brothers, I was witness to an important resurgence of Palestinian political agency. Writers and poets both throughout the Palestinian diaspora and living inside Palestine, Ghassan Kafani, Muhammad Darwish, Emil Habibi, Fadwa Tuqan, and Tawfiq Zayad, together with other gifted and engaged artists and intellectuals, played a vital role in this renaissance, culturally and politically. Their work helped to reshape a sense of Palestinian identity and purpose that has been tested by the Nakba and the barren years that followed. In novels, short stories, plays, and poetry, they gave voice to a shared national experience of loss, exile, alienation. At the same time, they evinced a stubborn insistence of the continuity of the Palestinian identity and steadfastness in the face of daunting odds. He goes on to detail all of the authors and specific impacts that they had, but I keep revisiting this minute detail in the complicated history of Palestine because so many people out there yap about the importance of literature, me included. The importance of learning other people's perspectives, growing your ideas of the world, and pushing your own boundaries and ideas. It's the literal reason why I started doing this series in the first place, to expose myself and other people to insanely valuable perspectives that exist out there in this world. But it is so different somehow when you hold in your hands the things that have saved an entire culture. To see the specific historic details, the specific books, the specific authors, the exact moments in which marginalized people used literature as a tool for their liberation. It's so simplifying sometimes to forget that the people of Gaza and the West Bank have dreams for their future when their present is crumbling apart. But Palestinians have a sense of self outside their occupation, emotions outside of suffering. They do not exist solely on the plane of violence, but in fact spread out over many different planes of existence. Creating poetry and short stories and novellas was and has been historically Palestine's way of reminding themselves of that. And the opportunity that everybody else in the entire world has as outsiders to view that inner complexity on such an intimate level is an opportunity that we cannot afford to let slip through our fingers if we are to become a better humanity. Literature has saved Palestine in the past. And the very least that we can do as outsiders is allow literature to save Palestine once again by picking up Palestinian books and reading them. There's so very much more that we can do, of course. I have linked news sources, nonprofits doing work in Gaza, basically just all the social media accounts that I get my most up-to-date news from down below in case there's more digging that you would like to do. Let those TikToks and reels from Palestinians play a few extra times. Take the time to speak up and share resources and information. Any number of these actions cost us so much less than the price that any single Palestinian has had to pay. Reading these titles has changed who I am forever, so I hope that you enjoy the vlog.
Hello, parking garage update. Minor detail. The very first chapter, the Israeli soldier gets bit by a snake. And even nature didn't want them there.
Minor detail. It's a lot, but it's not too much. So this is part of the synopsis, so it's not a spoiler, but basically the beginning of the book starts with a bunch of Israeli soldiers who kidnap a Palestinian girl, and they do all the things you would think that a soldier would do to a little girl. And the thing that is really striking a chord with me is that throughout this whole scenery of this experience that we're seeing here, nature is continually rebelling against the actions of these Israeli soldiers. There's a snake bite, there's a dog that is howling and won't stop because of the harm that they're doing to this Palestinian girl. And then there's a mention of camels, and the Israelis themselves, the main officer dude had this whole rant about how the Arabs use animals to destroy the land. And I think the symbolism that nature is holding here in this book so far is so deeply sad, but also so deeply beautiful, because I do feel like nature is on your side, is on the Palestinian side, because that's their land, right? And the land is fighting back as much as it can. And I just think that is been one of my favorite parts so far. Hard to have favorite parts in this book because it's real fucking sad. But like I said, despite the very graphic content, there's not enough details for it to be repulsive or too much. It's handled and written in a very well done way. So I'm about halfway through. Let's read the other half of this book. This is quite the tale. It's fiction, but you just know that something like this has probably happened. And the thing that's even sadder is that this is the closest that we would ever get to historical record of things like that happened, because so much of Palestine has been lost. And I felt like that was actually a big point in here, in a different way, in that the ways that censorship can lead to destruction, and the inaccessibility of Palestinians to access their own culture, their own history. Everything that was theirs has been taken from them. But this is one of the most amazing historical fictions that I've ever read. I'm not a historical fiction person very much, but this Adon Shibley's writing is absolutely stunning. And I've read something about how the language structure of Arabic is inherently more stereotypically poetic than anything, and so I think that's why everything that I read by an author who originally wrote in Arabic just is the most beautiful thing that I've ever read in my whole entire life. Khalil Gibran, he was from Lebanon, wrote in Arabic, and he's one of my favorite writers of all time. This was so absolutely beautiful. Minor detail is the story of a little girl who was captured by Israeli soldiers, sexually assaulted, and then 40-50 years later, a Palestinian woman finds out about this incident and tries to learn more because of this obsession within her. It's extremely short and to the point. Super trigger warnings. Always check your trigger warnings, but this one is so deeply sad. It's written with so much reality in its pages, despite it being a fiction novel. There's this point in the novel where she comes upon the old site of a Palestinian village, and talks about all of the vegetation, all of the trees that have covered the land. And if you watched my last video about reading about Palestine, I read Tracing Homelands by Linda Dittmar, who is an Israeli woman who talks about her realization of the harms that Israel has done. She has a whole section in that book about how when Israel fully gained control, they spent so much time planting trees over the land because those trees would be the things that would hide the remnants of the Palestinians that had been there before. And how so many of like sites that the Nakba happened and existed have been completely erased because of the trees and the vegetation that Israel planted there. And how the trees were used as a tool against the Palestinians. And in minor detail, Adanya Shibley talks about the trees in a really similar way. And like the details in minor detail speak so much, and they say it so loudly that it almost leaves you feeling so speechless at the end. It really does, especially because it ends exactly how you don't want it to and exactly how you know it's going to. I don't think there's any surprise in the ending of this book. There's only reality. 5 stars. Absolutely stunning and seriously heartbreaking. Ever Since I Did Not Die by Rami Al-Ashek. I'm almost finished. I really am almost finished with it. And I should have updated you sooner, but I'm so completely blown away by this writing. And I have the immediate urge to pick up everything by Rami Al-Ashek that has ever been translated into English, because this is some of the most stunning, poetic writing that I've ever encountered in my whole entire life. And it's so sad, but it speaks to some deep and human part of you inside. Rami Al-Ashek was born in a Palestinian refugee camp in Syria. His mother was Syrian, his father was Palestinian, so he is of both nations. And despite literally being born in Syria, faced so many trials as a refugee living in the refugee camp. He was imprisoned by the Syrian regime in 2011, and then he was released, and then he was recaptured and imprisoned again by Jordan, mostly inspired by Israel's continued attacks against Palestinian people that lived outside of their boundaries. Israel attacked a lot of the countries in the nearby areas to basically wipe out the Palestinians that had gone there to escape. Like, even leaving Israel, the land of Israel, wasn't enough for them. It's always been eradication, basically. But getting tangent. Watch my other video if you need any of the context for any of this. I put a lot of work into it. Rami Al-Ashek then escaped from prison, spent 2 years under a fake name in Jordan, and then received a writing scholarship to write in Germany. Escaped and has been living in exile in Germany, unable to return to Syria, to Palestine since. And these are the soliloquies of his soul. I don't have truly and honestly. It's basically like a poetic essay collection about Rami Al-Ashek's experiences living through all of this war. Living as a refugee, as a fugitive, all of these pieces and parts that came together to create the person and the life that he lived. He doesn't classify his writing as poetry. And I might disagree with him a little bit, but it's because they're almost like poetic essays born of emotion and raw energy that have existed within him and have a need to be released and to come out. I want to finish this, so I will come back to you in a bit. This preface is the most beautiful preface that I've ever read in my entire life. I gathered these texts like someone collecting body parts. Here are the pieces of my body, haphazardly brought together in a paper bag. This randomness of body parts is real in its destruction. Bloody at times, violent, honest, imaginary, personal. It looks like me with all my madness and sickness, how the revolution made me grow, what the war broke inside me, and what exile chipped away. I have no head, no name,
no identity. I gathered these pieces while fully believing that reality needs me to be a writer more than a poet. All that is emotional is not poetry. What does not belong to music is not poetry, and the ugliness surrounding us hurts poetry. We could say that this is just a collection of texts that could bear a name. Call them what you'd like. I tried, without having decided beforehand, to make the ugly beautiful, and to put on layers of mascara to make it seem what they call creative. When I wrote these pieces, I did not think they would be collected in a book, turned into a testimony, or published in any certain form. Let us save this collection from classification, as it has already suffered enough cruelty at the hands of its author. Okay, finished Ever Since I Did Not Die. 5 stars. This is some of the most amazing poetry that I've ever read in my whole entire life. I don't have very much else to say about it because everything that could possibly need to be said is said in these words. And Rami al-Ashek, his words are the words that you should learn about. His words are way more valuable and more important than literally anything that I could say about this book. It is poetic and stunning, beautiful and violent and disturbing and raw. There is a human soul in these pages. If you love poetry, pick this up. If you are a human being with trauma, pick this up because it is every dark thought within a single human being, all coalesced to make one of the most beautiful collections of writing. I will never forget this. I'm literally a changed person after reading this. I can't describe any more than that. I don't have some beautiful artful way. Rami al-Ashek has already taken all of those beautiful artful ways and used them for himself. And I just, wow.
Hello, I found out something really cool. Hi. Funnily enough, as I'm filming this Palestine reading video, my book club decided to read a Palestinian memoir, Mapping My Return by Salman Abu Sitta, which I've never actually heard of. It is about a Palestinian man and his growing up in Palestine pre-Nakba and his experience of, what happened to him and his family during the Nakba and things like that. And I guess he's become really big part of the Palestine Land Society. I don't know too much. I just did a precursory search about it because I was like, oh shit. So literally perfect timing. So we will be attending book club together. How exciting. So this book is very long. It's 450 pages. I'm gonna have very little B-roll for this, if any at all, because I'm just reading it as an ebook. It's not an audiobook. I don't have a physical copy of it yet. I probably will end up picking up one. I just didn't have the funds to do so, and it was on Everand. So I'm gonna use my resources. Let's see what Salman Abu Sitta's life is like. I am about 100 pages into Mapping My Return, and it's devastating, but also I'm loving it. There is so many names that I think, it evokes the real people that experienced these events so long ago in the past. It really evokes them into present time, right? The whole, first 100 pages of the book are about leading up to the
Nakba. It's not even about Abu Sitta. It's about his genealogy, his ancestry, where his family had grown up, all of the like things that they did and the ways that they affected the places around them, Egypt specifically, because the Abu Sitta clan basically held land over the entire southern part of Palestine, was like one of the largest clans, and had hundreds of people that worked and participated in the Abu Sitta clan, and they interacted with Egypt and all of the Egyptian tribes and things that were nearby. And as somebody who's done so much research on Israel-Palestine conflict, it is so refreshing and different to hear the earlier history of Palestine, the history that we can't let be forgotten in the face of remembering tragedy, because that history is, you know, what is the foundation of Palestinian people today. And I think that that's so cool to see. It's so interesting to see. And like, I just can't get over the names. Like, he names so many individuals, and it's so important because it's now that like so much of Palestine is gone, so many libraries, so many universities, there's so much of Palestine's history that is at risk of being lost forever. And I think the tone is so different because in a lot of the things that you read about Palestinians interacting with the Israeli regime, and the first 100 pages are not about that. They are about Palestinian freedom and the Palestinian life and culture, and it's so important to preserve those types of things when so much other information about Palestine is being lost right now. Hello, I come to you after having finished Mapping My Return by Salman Abu Sitta, finally, because I think the book club is soon. I need to check when it is. But I don't normally rate memoirs or biographies like this, but this is like an archival work of art. It really is. Salman Abu Sitta is so diligent in the naming of every person that he interacted with or that had any significant impact on his life. And this is so much more than just a memoir. It is a piece of Palestinian history that has saved the names and the moments of so much history of a people like who have been lost, of people who have lost so much of their own history and all things like that. Like, it's just so much more than the memories of Abu Sitta. It's so many years of heritage and so many people that were part of the Abu Sitta community, and so many of them now lost, and like this memoir is all that is left of them, of pieces that no longer exist in Palestine. And Salman Abu Sitta does like just the most amazing job, like in being extremely detailed about everything. Like, every memory has been researched and double checked, and you wouldn't think a memoir would take so much work, but this memoir, I'm sure, took just so much research and collaboration and effort. And I think it's like unfortunate, you know, that a Palestinian has to fact check their own memoir so often because they can't just remember the past as they remember it because of the propaganda that they always have to fight against. It's like they have to present everything in a factual way, or Israel has the capability to twist it or to take the information or the intention away from it, or things like that. More than anything, Salman Abu Sitta's memoir is the most vivid window into an older version of Palestine that we have, the version before the Nakba. And there are so many parts that were so beautiful to know and understand, and there were so many parts that were so heartbreaking to see get destroyed. And it'll be really exciting to have conversation with other people about it as well, because I feel like with all of these other Palestinian books, I do talk to a couple of my other friends about it, but most of it is just sitting here and talking to my camera. And so I am really looking forward to having a full-on conversation with a group of people about it.
Yes, look at her. There she is. So excited for book club. Little did she know her inescapable disorganization would cause her to miss the book club. But that didn't stop the discussion from being quite the remarkable one.
Yeah, I mean, it's not good vibes, that's for sure.
Especially in the beginning when he was like describing his childhood and like how beautiful it was. I was like, oh,
I know, and you know what's gonna happen too.
I know,
That's
like
the
this
worst
places
part.
he's describing, like Rafah and Gaza.
Yeah. Like there was one part where he talks about how the Palestinians, it was in the 40s or something, they were rationed 1,600 calories a day. And I was like, oh my God. And I literally was just double checking the news today. They had to cut off food support in Gaza because of the blockades.
I don't know. It's one of those things where when I see Americans talk about it like too much, and I'm like, I don't know, like, do we have any right to argue so strongly? Because
that's the most bizarre thing is like the U.S. at first did not support what's going on, and then actually it was Truman who needed the Jewish vote to win the presidency that kind of like flipped that narrative.
This is from a book. It's a quote from Senator Joe Biden in 1986, who told the Senate about the U.S.-Israeli relationship. This is a direct quote.
I think it's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
Oh, boom, there you go. That's literally what the British were trying to do.
Yes. It's from the book Feminism, Internationalism, and Palestine by Nada Elia. I haven't read it, but someone tweeted that quote with like a picture of it, and I was like, holy shit.
That one thing I liked about this book is the mapping my return, like the emphasis on geography, because that is so important with the placement of where Palestine is and how it's such. I think the author refers to it as the heart of the Middle East. We watched an interview from 7 months ago, which I think was like right after the October 7th.
It would have been, yeah, probably.
And he was saying that his brother's house was destroyed, his family's house was destroyed, and that his nephew, who was in London working as a doctor, actually went back to Gaza to help treat the refugees there. And I tried looking in the comments to see, like, because this was 7 months ago, to see if like his family is okay or if they made it out or like what's going on. They were all in Arabic, so I couldn't.
When I was reading about October 7th, so in the book, he's in Egypt when it happens, but I think his family, most of the people he knew, settled in or ended up in Han Yunis. I don't know how to say it. That one city, and that's where one of like the massacres going to happen. And that's where his friend, who was a teenager, was shot by the Israeli soldiers. That is exactly the same city where the attacks were launched from.
Oh my gosh, really? That's so interesting.
I found myself doing that a lot in this book. Anytime he'd mention a village or a place, I'd be like, I've seen that in the news. I've seen this in the news.
Yeah.
He estimated that in the lands that were taken from his family today, there are about 15 Israelis per square kilometer. And then where his descendants live in Gaza, there are 5,000 people per
Jesus
kilometer.
Christ.
And when he says that, which I guess I knew this, but he said you could drive the length of Gaza in 30 minutes and you could the width in 10 minutes. And there's like over 1 million people. It's so crazy.
Another random thing, I think one of the most beautiful things that was in the book, it was a very small story, it's like a paragraph, but it was talking about after the Nakba, and there were refugee camps, literally tents and stuff, and how one man sat at a table with a bowl of hummus to sell with his family sitting behind him. And then the next day he returned with 2 bowls of hummus because he had been successful in the first day. And then over the course of a couple of months, he made a whole business, and it was called like his little restaurant or whatever his name was, I can't remember. And he was able to, I mean, it's just a shitty little table, in a refugee camp, but it's still just like these little bits of life that you can bring back to these places just to make you feel like there's some sort of fucking control. And just seeing that, someone can do that, it's horrible to have it in the beginning, but it shows the resilience and, hope of the Palestinian people. It's really remarkable.
I really think, I had this thought earlier and then we got sidetracked, but I think it speaks to a larger issue of identity politics, where we're focusing on, for instance, Jewish people, which are obviously very relevant to the conversation, but at the end of the day, it's not about like Jewish people, it's about the colonialism, it's about the Zionism, and they just so happen to be involved and were historically pawns in that process. But anytime you try to talk about colonialism or Zionism, it's like we go back into the identity politics and we go back into like the religion and like these people versus those people. And it's like, that's not necessarily the issue. It's like there's bigger strings being pulled.
With what Liz is saying is it's all about like money and power. Like I personally feel like if I was Jewish, obviously that's a big if I was Jewish, I would be angry that the US is doing all this shit like in my name, right?
Yeah. I've seen it. But yeah, again, not to speak for Jewish, but I've seen that as well. Like a lot of anti-Zionist Jewish movements that are horrified and angry because their religion is being bastardized in the sake of colonialism.
Shout out Jewish Voices for Peace.
It's not a quote, but do you know what I thought was so impactful? And I'm saying this, I didn't finish the book, Kenzie, so it might not be applicable to you, but near the end, when he does get back and he's at like the dirt where his house used to be, and he literally just lays on the ground and he's like, I will return here. This will be my final resting ground. And he's so motivated to the point where like he and his family's bodies are going to be flown out to be 1 mile away from their home. And he said he brought 2 handfuls of dirt home or something like that. And he said his daughters were the first in his family traced back 14 generations or something like that to not be born on that soil.
Wow.
And that was how we found ourselves a month later sitting on a Zoom call with the Salman Abu Sitta of the Palestinian Land Society, author of Mapping My Return.
Hello. How wonderful to meet you. Let me say a few things first. I make 2 books. One is called Decolonizing, and the other is called Natalieandcompany. Both are about Palestine. 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 probably 10, maybe hundreds of interviews, but this one is the dearest to my heart because it's so natural and so genuine and so pure, not motivated by professionals or politicians or scholars or people who are against or for Palestine, but for genuine young people who wanted to know the truth. It's so refreshing. One of the important conclusions which people, I hope, realize now that the 75 years, 76 now years of a Nakba did not stop. It just even taken greater and more violent and more, more bloody version of before. For example, in 1948, the Zionists who came from Europe attacked 530 villages and depopulated them, and they make now the refugees in Palestine, Palestinian refugees, over 9 million. Now, to do that, it's not easy to depopulate 530 cities and villages. You do that by massacres, and they committed very well documented 90 massacres at least, and they created what is called in international law ethnic cleansing, which means I take your land and property and kick you out of it, and it becomes mine. Now, therefore, if I take your land and property and I don't need you, you have to go away. You have to go away. So this is called ethnic cleansing. But what happened is that the Israelis chased the refugees for 76 years wherever they are. They attacked Gaza several times in 1953, 56, 1967. They attacked refugee camps. Even today, if you notice where they attack only refugee camps in Jenin, for example, and before in Sabra and Shatila, because they wanted to eliminate the people who claim their right to return home. I have a suggestion, being an old man, of course. Now, this great current of sympathy by young people around the world in campuses and so on, it should be converted into a permanent force, a legal force, to change things. It's not enough to feel sorry and make demonstrations and have campus protests and so on. This has to be converted into a legal force, especially in the countries which aid and abet the crimes of Israel. We must convert this moral force into a legal and actual force to bring justice back. But there are steps in this process. Step number one is recognition of the problem. As you well know, the American people have been kept in the dark about the real situation. Telling the truth, letting the cat out of the bag, is very difficult to put the cat back in the bag. People now know the situation, thanks to this little device called mobile. The enemy of justice is to let people not know, to silence them, to frighten them, to threaten them, to blackmail them if they tell the truth. But who pays the price in the end? It's the American people, because they are used as a weapon for injustice. One of the things which people should know when they say hostages must be freed, I agree 100%. Hostages must be freed. Everybody must return to his home free. I agree with that. But who are the hostages? There are 2.3 million Palestinians who are hostages in a place called Gaza Strip. This name did not exist before Israel created that name. What is Gaza Strip? Gaza Strip is the place where 247 villages, people from 247 villages living in southern Palestine, have been driven by 90 massacres in 1948 to be huddled and cornered in a concentration camp called Gaza. Area of Gaza Strip, 365 square kilometers, which is 1.3% of Palestine. Their home, these refugees in Gaza, their home is 50% of Palestine. Imagine people living in the southern half of Palestine, 50%, are driven into 1% in a concentration camp, denied movement, denied access to food and everything, and being attacked all the time. So these are the refugees who are hostages and who should return home.
You see the article, you'll also see that the fence, where the fence was for Gaza Strip, is actually not even the correct UN armistice line. It's just that Israel just kept pushing it up like as far as it can, right? So, I mean, a lot of those is not even technically, like it is occupied territory, Palestinian land.
When I have to leave my home in the middle of the night under the threat of mortars and machine guns, we have to escape for our life. And so the land is taken by Israel. The property is taken by Israel. Government of Palestine left behind records of birth, deaths, education, banking, transport, agriculture, health, and so on. All this is seized by Israel. So when we became refugees, we had only the clothes on our back and our memory, and of course our identity. So we tried to recreate that in exile. And a lot of people try to do that. There are many things people do in the last 76 years. And now they build that. And for example, my daughter Rania, who's here, she has to learn about her history from either memory or what we write, and all the documentation is still in the hands of Israel. But luckily, my work in Palestinian Land Society, which I hope you have time to look at the website, meant that for 40 years I'm touring capitals of the world to collect documents of Palestine. In London, where I graduated, for example, I had wealth of information, but let there be no mistake, there is not one door to open and get all the documents. In England, for example, there are so many, military has archives, foreign office has archives, and so on. Then you go to Paris, for example, Bibliothèque Nationale, National Library, had papers since Napoleon. In Palestine Land Society, we produced the Atlas of Palestine, 1917 to 1966. Now it's in the 4th edition, in English, in Arabic, in Spanish, and in Russian. So this is a massive campaign. History did not see it. How people recreated their existence in Palestine for 4,000 years. So which country in Europe has a complete record of its history for 2,000 years more than Palestine? Not one, not one, not one. I say once again, I'm so delighted talking to you because you're so fresh and so genuine. I said again, I speak in universities, even sometimes United Nations and so on. It's different. You are different. You are genuine. You are true. You are honest. You are quote unquote. You are people, genuine people. Thank you. Thank you very much. By the way, before I leave you, I have a Palestine poster map. I would be delighted to send you 1 or even 10 copies if you send me an address. Seek and you will find. Seek truth and you will find it. You are seeing a crime in process. And therefore, all of us, you, me, all of us, our duty is to try to stop this ongoing crime. Thank you all very much, very much. I have hope in the future with people like you.
Oh, thank
It will
you.
be a
That's
better
so
world.
kind.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
I will remember speaking to Salman Abu Sitta for forever. It was an immense honor both to read his book and witness his life story, as well as listen to him speak wonderfully for an hour. Hello. I am quite enjoying this. I'm enjoying Letting Gods quite a lot. I think it is quite dense because it just provides so many dense topics to think about. Like, there was an essay about the connection to the land that Palestinians have, and how, like, they have a cultural connection to their land. And historically, like, Palestinians have had that cultural connection to their land and have believed that their land is a part of, like, their spiritual journey and their religious journey and things like that. And so how having it taken away from them was just not just losing a resource or anything like that. Like, it was spiritually, emotionally damaging, like, in many kinds of ways, and also took, like, that connection away from the newer generation because they've never had that opportunity to connect with the land that they came from. The essay in here that Rafir Al-Arir wrote is so deeply sad, especially knowing that he is no longer on this earth anymore since the release of this last year. Since the release of this in 2022, he was killed in his family home in the past 6 months, and his essay is pretty hopeless. There's so much doubt riddled within its words because
after experiencing this situation for their entire lives, how are you at every moment supposed to have hope of the better future? It's very, honest and real about the fact that, yes, Palestinians' resistance is, has a fighting spirit, and they are going to do everything in their power to be able to return to their land and gain it back. But that doesn't mean that these people don't experience a deep grief and sadness and hopelessness at times of the situation that they've been placed in and that they live in. Very sad thing to start the entire thing off with. It really set a very just like melancholy tone for the whole thing. And there was another story that talked about how like the humanitarian efforts in Gaza, despite all of the good that they did, have it detailed the harm that those organizations have done, because in order to get in there, some of those organizations, specifically the Quakers that he mentioned that helped after the Nakba, would go in and help under the pretense of, we're being unbiased, we're just helping innocent civilians get medical care and that kind of thing, and how that idea separated so many of these injured Palestinians from the harms and suffering that were being done against them, and it basically caused them to have to, in a way, deny the things that the things that had happened in order for them to get the care that they needed. And how the unbiased humanitarian causes and the harm that they can do in the denial of the situations of the people that they're trying to help, which I thought was interesting and actually something that I had never ever thought of before. And so that was super interesting. And then the one that I'm currently reading and almost done, I'm like really on the fence about it, because I think some of the concepts in it are so interesting. It just, the writer of the essay is not the most like entertaining to read. Like it kind of feels like I'm reading more like a business proposal. But like I still think like it's totally valid. Like, not everybody has to be this like, intriguing and like entrancing author in order for their perspective to be valid. I just want to say that now, but it has been kind of a slog to get through this story in particular. The essay is about the use of technology in Israel and in Palestine, the gap of Israel being one of the most technologically military advanced like communities in the entire world, and how far away and separate that is from the level of technology that Palestinians have access to. And there's so much said in this essay. Like I said, it's super dense. But a couple of things that I found interesting that you might were the fact that you weren't allowed, like it was illegal in the US to take high quality images of Israel from the years 1997 to 2002, which I thought it was crazy. This was mostly done obviously to hide the effect that the colonization had, but that Israel's colonization had on the land, because the effect was so severe that you can literally see it from space. Obviously that's gone now. So author talks about all these different ways that technology is used to harm Palestinians by Israel, obvious things like drones and AI facial recognition, but also how, when done on a local scale, AI and technology in general has the ability to lift up marginalized communities and allow them to elevate themselves in a more rapid and efficient way than they would if their decolonization was left in the hands of humans. It talks a lot about how AI can be used to find, perpetrators in the Israeli army who committed violent acts unjustly, and identify them. It can be used to reimagine the Palestinian homeland before the damage that Israel did to it, in order to reconnect Palestinians with their connection to their land. Basically, a whole bunch of things that would simply allow Palestinians to reclaim control over their own life. I think it's so easy nowadays, because technology is so used for evil,
to be like, oh, technology is definitely evil, and forget the fact that like technology was used to make humans' life better, and it should be used to continue to make humans' life better. There are ways that it can be used to harm, absolutely. That's why the author really focuses on like the use of technology locally, because when controlled locally, when manufactured locally, there's just not as much of a likelihood as those types of technologies being used against against other communities, marginalized people and things like that. Super interesting, especially because there is such a large gap between the resources of Israel and the resources of Palestine that sometimes it feels hard to understand how they would bridge that gap. Because even if the wartime ends, even if the violence ends, there would still be the power structure of Palestinians being at the mercy to Israel's economy, to Israel's technology, and all of those things. So like there has to be a rebalance of things in other places as well, other than just the violence. Like obviously ceasefire now, right? But once ceasefire now happens, that's just the beginning of another phase of work and effort and things. And I think that's one of the things that I feel like I have learned the most from reading Palestinian authors, because I'm presented with the situation as it is currently, the harms being done in this exact moment, through the 24-hour news cycle. But these Palestinians and their lives go so much further beyond that. And to remember that is to, do honor to their existence and make sure not to minimize them just to a suffering people, which is, what those humanitarian groups did, like in minimizing the situations that these people are in and why things have happened the way that they are. So much to chew on in this book, just because it's just a bunch of different essays. And and then there was also an essay that talked about how unique architecture had been popping up in Palestine because they had to find unique ways to rebuild buildings that they were almost inevitable to get knocked down again. Reusing materials and repurposing things in order to serve different purposes than what they had originally, and things like that. And that was really interesting, because that's going to be, I think, in my opinion, my professional opinion, not that it means that much, but I do think, the architecture is going to have to be one of the first things of recovery, because those are going to be the first steps that allow the Palestinian people to return to their homes. There are going to be safe spaces for their families to exist as they rebuild their land. I think something that brings me a lot of hope is ideas like this, because they make it feel like the current violence will end. It doesn't feel so endless. And I know I only feel like that because I'm not living in that situation. That was even, parts of an essay that talked about that, about how they're in this permanent state of now, because of, the violence that is committed against them, and they cannot spend as much time talking about the past or talking about the future. Although they do, they don't have all of those benefits of always thinking about those things. They are completely consumed by, the present moment. And it's been super interesting. It's made me feel so many different things and think about so many different things, which is, I think, a little different than some of the other things that I've read, because I think some of the other things that I've read have had more of a focus, a historical focus, a political focus, and things. And this is just kind of all over the place. So it is a lot to absorb. I feel like I do need to spend so much time on each individual story, absorbing the consequences and impact of all of the things that are talked about in here. And the essay, of course, doesn't even begin to describe the real extent of the work behind all of these concepts and ideas and movements and resources. It's honestly a lot. It feels like almost every concept in here that's being presented is a very new concept, despite me being really well read on Palestine. Like, I'm very familiar with a lot of the discussion, and still all of the concepts that are being discussed in here are very new. It's definitely it's also like one of the softest books that I've ever owned. Like, I don't know, like maybe they like put a double coat of wax or what on it, but it's like legitimately like the softest book that I've ever owned. So I think I have like 5 more essays. I'm about halfway through. A little more than that, just because there's like a bunch of notes at the end. This is the last one. I'm gonna be kind of sad. I've really enjoyed reading Palestinian literature. I'm not going to stop, obviously. I just feel like reading about Palestine made me realize about how many gaps of knowledge that I have about so many oppressed people in the world, and I want to reduce those gaps and limit them, in honor of those people. Because like I said in my last video, Hala Alon, she came up with this quote. I'll link her stuff down in the description. She's literally a genius, about how bearing witness is an honor. And, the first thing that we can do is carry the truth that these Palestinians are giving us with care, and honor it as and give it the respect that it deserves, because it is hard and it is violent and horrible, all of these things that these people are experiencing. That doesn't change the fact that it is the truth of these people's lives, and the only way to honor that is to bear witness to that truth and to never deny it, and to always uplift their stories. Reading Palestinian books over the past 6 months has just opened up my eyes in so many ways to the places that I'm really choosing not to bear witness to, and the things that I have willingly or unwillingly chosen to ignore. And I just don't want to ignore those places anymore. I want to know the details like I do Palestine, and I want to know how to advocate for those people in the best way that they believe that they should be advocated for. Like, that's, I think, a big thing that reading so much about Palestine has taught me, in that, like, every colonized people has their own idea of what would be best for them to be decolonized. Palestinians is the right to return. All, Palestinian resistance has been built upon their ability to return to their homeland. And I would like to understand what is foundational in other oppressed and marginalized communities' resistance, because I think, though, that kind of information would help me grow to be, a better activist, a better human, more empathetic, all of those things, just like in general. By 2014, Salma reached her 15th year without ever experiencing a whole day with electricity. Over the last 15 years, Abu Tariq has come to know that access to light in Gaza is a purely political matter and has nothing to do with Gaza as poverty-stricken or underdeveloped. In fact, there is a political price to be paid for electricity or its absence. If, for example, the current government in Gaza suddenly announced to the world that it accepts Trump's deal of the century, and that it appreciated the efforts of the US administration in safeguarding the well-being of the Palestinian people, then it's likely that every corner of the Gaza Strip would light up entirely in a minute. Yet, Abu Tariq would feel shame for lighting his home at the cost of giving up Jerusalem, the Jordan Valley, and 1/3 of the West Bank. Instead, he puts his mind at peace in the midst of pitch-black darkness. What could be more beautiful than a darkness that keeps reminding us of our steadfastness, a darkness interrupted only by the light of the moon? For he who clouds the moon doesn't avoid the night. Okay, I returned to you one day later, having finished. Something that I was super happy about was that the second half of the essays in here were a lot less, like, technically detailed and very much more personable, very much more, less, not as dense as the ones in the beginning. So I think that there was definitely a good balance of the different types of perspective of Gazans that you get in this book, which I was actually like quite impressed with. I think they have lots of different kinds of people and lots of different people that have different opinions on the place that they live and their homeland. To see all of those opinions and ideas all come together here is just so interesting. Even as somebody, you know, me who is really, you know, quite well read, I feel like there was so much new information that I learned from here in all different kinds of ways. The man who made libraries, like a man after my own heart, was one of the saddest. And there is this one about a woman who gets stuck in Gaza during a like 51-day siege that Israel does, like in her like memory of going there, and once she finally got out, talked about how she was never going back. And like the separation and in a way hatred feels, or even has to feel, about her homeland in order for her to feel like she can step away from it or pull herself away from it. It's this forced distance from the place that she grew up because of the suffering that she experienced there at the hands of Israel's. Definitely a mixed bag. So if you like, definitely a mixed bag, but I think in situations like this, that's not a bad thing. Books that are meant to open people's perspective and gain understanding, I think the mixed bag effect is, you know, pretty good. It's definitely, I mean, emotional just because, like, the situation is high octane, high emotion. But I think that this is more of, like, an analytical look from the people in Gaza. It's not as much so about the emotional timeline of things. It's more about the experiential timeline of things. Pretty good. Pretty good. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that reading journey. I most certainly did. I think it's kind of irrelevant to rate these, just because I think something so innately human, like, just has no, like, a rating system has no effect on it, no impact on it. 5 out of 5 for all three of these, obviously. Minor Detail, literally one of the most amazing historical fictions that I've ever read, and I will forever be comparing every historical fiction that I ever read to Minor Detail. Adania Shibli, an absolute genius. This book speaks so many volumes, so seriously heartbreaking, but absolutely impactful. Next, my favorite of the list, Ever Since I Did Not Die by Rami Al-Ashek. I have not read poetry like this in a really long time. Poetry that has touched the most vulnerable parts of my own sense of self and opened them up, caused them to glow in some way. This book is a very tortured human existence distilled down to its absolute core. There's not a single word in here that does not have value, that does not have more than one meaning, that does not have impact. There's not one sentence in here that does not portray a truly vulnerable human. Literally, I will be raving about this book for forever. It is the thing in this video that changed me fundamentally in a way that I cannot describe, because it's an emotional change. It's an interior change that I don't really have a grasp on, but that I do know that I was able to feel after reading this. I think this one kind of gets left out of a lot of lists of Palestinian authors because he is a Syrian Palestinian refugee, but I think his words are like, Rami Al-Ashek should be everywhere. Absolutely. A Light in Gaza, absolutely phenomenal. I think the balance between nonfiction and personal memoir, personal essay is absolutely perfect. I think there is the push and pull of realistic scenarios and situations and actionable steps, as well as dreams and hopes and wants that the people of Gaza all have. So much so about the future and the hope that Palestinians still hold, that I think it's so valuable in that. Like, absolutely so deeply, deeply important to remember, to recall hope, and hope that Palestinians have for themselves. Thanks for watching. This one was a little more emotional than the last one, considering that these were a little more emotional than the last reads. If you want me to read more Palestinian things, let me know, because I already have some on my shelf that I am like ready to pick up and looking forward to. If you want to experience those things with me, let me know, comment below. Make sure that you are staying up to date on everything that is going on with Palestine. Like I said, I provided links for my favorite social media news outlets, my favorite activists and things like that below, just in case anybody wants to know where I am getting my information and is curious about how I stay up to date in the things that I do and learn. Free Palestine. That's all there's left to say. Free Palestine, and thanks for watching.